This segment of Delmarva Life is brought to you by Peninsula Regional Medical Center.
Living your best Delmarva life. You know, each year approximately 15,000 women in the U.S. are diagnosed with cervical cancer, and each year about 5,000 women die from the disease. But unlike many cancers, cervical cancer is preventable because we know what causes it. And January is National Cervical Cancer Awareness Month. Joining us today on Delmarva Life is Pam Fleckenstein, Program Director of the Women's Prevention and Wellness Services at Peninsula Regional Medical Center. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Let's start off by telling us, what is cervical cancer?
Cervical cancer is a change in the superficial cells that cover the top of the cervix and sometimes extend up into the canal of the cervix towards the uterus, the inside of the uterus. Cervical cancer can manifest itself in a couple of different ways. We pick it up on a pap smear generally. It can look like an ulceration, it could be a dilated blood vessel, it could be just an unusual appearance of the cervix that would alert us to something that was abnormal. The change is most often associated with the human papillomavirus.
All right. Now, you had mentioned the pap smear is one of the ways of detecting this abnormality. Are there other ways of finding cervical cancer in a woman?
The other way of finding cervical cancer is basically the high-risk HPV testing, and that's HPV for the human papillomavirus.
Mm-hmm.
Type 16 and 18 are generally associated with cervical cancer. When they're present, that alerts us to take a closer look.
So, and as far as prevention is concerned, preventing HPV is the way you prevent cervical cancer?
For most cervical cancers, probably 95–96% of cervical cancers are related to the human papillomavirus. There are some other very rare cancers that I probably have never even seen that, you know, can cause cervical cancer, but for the most part, human papillomavirus is the culprit for this particular type of cancer.
And now you see there are a lot of vaccines, or at least there's at least one or two vaccines that they're asking young ladies to get to prevent the HPV virus.
Absolutely, and I strongly recommend these vaccines. If anyone had any question about the effectiveness of these vaccines or the side effects or the safety, they can always go to the CDC website and get really accurate information. But the one vaccine, Gardasil, that prevents 4 types of HPV, type 16, 18, 6, and 11, while the Cervarix, the other vaccine, prevents 2 types. It's available to girls between the ages of 9 and up to 26. It also is available to young men now, since they also carry the HPV vaccine. However, there's a little controversy about that at the moment.
All right, now we're going to take a look at some of the risk factors for cervical cancer, and we just saw them there. Some of the things that you need to think about if you're trying to prevent cervical cancer.
HPV exposure being number 1, multiple partners, or even if it's your one and only partner, has that partner had other partners that could have possibly exposed them to the HPV virus?
So safe sex practices.
Safe sex practices, absolutely. Condoms probably prevent it, but viruses are tiny, so we can't say 100% that's preventative. Cigarette smoking is an associated factor with the HPV virus. And the way that works is there are chemicals in the tobacco, and it's not just your lungs that are affected. These chemicals can concentrate in the female cervix. This virus has an affinity to these chemicals, and they sort of fit together like puzzle pieces. And they want to hold on to each other. So women that smoke can't clear it as easily.
Okay, and what are some of the other factors?
Ignoring your pap smear. If you ever had an abnormal pap smear and said, oh, it was just a little abnormal, and don't go back for follow-up, this can be very risky. And I think another problem with cervical cancer is that women lack access to care quite often.
All right, well, there's some new recommendations to prevent cervical cancer, and as always, you can find them on our website, delmarvalife.com. You can get a recap of everything we talked about today, plus more information on cervical cancer and how to prevent it. Just log on to delmarvalife.com, click on the show tab. Thank you so much. Well, still ahead on Delmarva Life, what does your spice cabinet look like? Do you have to dig to find the salt and pepper? Hunt down the oregano? Well, that's where the swivel store comes into play. How does it work? We put it to the test next.